Hi guys, and welcome to another video. So I've done a bit of a switch up this week because I wanted to get my owls started on a fresh vlog. So the coming week will be up until the 31st of March, and then I'll start a fresh vlog on Wednesday, which will be the 1st of April, but then at least it will be coherent and it will make it easier to separate what I've been reading for owls and what I've read in the month of March. Now, I decided that I was going to have a look at some of the 4-star and the 5-star ratings that I gave to books in 2019, and when I looked at Goodreads it was a lot. So I've decided that I'm going to be splitting this into 2 parts. So this week you'll be seeing part 1, next week will be part 2. And hopefully you'll stick around for part 2 because, as I said, there are a lot. I do feel like I gave away my 4 stars and my 5 stars quite easily last year, whereas this year I am being a lot more strict with things. So I hope you enjoy it and let's get cracking. So there are quite a few books to go through, so I've ended up putting them into sort of authors or series, just because I do have a tendency of reading one book at the beginning of the year, it appears, and then not getting to the second book until further on down the year. So I've put them into sections and I'm trying to make this as coherent as possible because I didn't even realise myself, and I think this year I'm being a bit more strict with my 5-star reads, because by the looks of this I really enjoyed the books and I'm perfectly happy to keep giving 4 and 5 stars if I have really enjoyed the book. But I want to know whether I read the book during a hype and ended up really enjoying it and giving it the rating that I did because it was hyped up and I got caught up in it, or whether it was a genuine rating. So my first one is V.E. Schwab. Now, I read City of Ghosts at the very beginning of 2019. I mean, this was my first read of 2019. It was also my first read of V.E. Schwab and I absolutely adored this book. I'm not 100% sure why I gave it 4 stars at the beginning of the year, but I know now, coming back to it a year and a bit down the line, that I would like to up it to 5 stars already, because the feeling that I get when I think about this book and when I come back to trying to explain it to people, I just get really warm inside and I want to reread it. So in order for me to want to reread a middle grade, I know that it must be good. But yeah, I really enjoy getting to know Cassidy Blake. She sees ghosts and her parents are paranormal investigators or supernatural investigators, and they travel to Edinburgh together, and Cassidy Blake ends up meeting lots of different ghosts and spirits, and not all of them are good. But she has a best friend who is also a ghost, and he tends to help her get out of sticky situations as well as get her into some. But I really enjoyed this book, and I immediately ran out to get Tunnel of Bones, which again was a fantastic read. And they travel to Paris this time with her parents, and it was such a good read again. I mean, it's very similar. They go to a different city and they are her parents are trying to film a really good paranormal investigation show, whereas Cassidy Blake is actually dealing with the entities within that city. Spirits are actually trying to pull Cass over to the Vale, which is like a curtain that separates the living from the dead. But they want to pull her over because she is going over and she's staying too long when she does. So they want her over that veil and they are continually trying to pull her over. So a little bit darker than the original, and just in general I think it was definitely more edgy and definitely questioning whether it was a young middle grade or whether it was just something that was supposed to be a little bit older. But yes, I thoroughly enjoyed that. So my next read from V.E. Schwab within that year was A Darker Shade of Magic, and I read this, I think, when it was in a bit of a hype. I know that Jade from Jade Ray Reads absolutely loves this trilogy, so I thought I would start it, and I feel like I was slightly disappointed. Thinking about it right now, I'm not 100% sure why I gave it the 4 stars, because the more I think about it, the more I think maybe I should have lowered it to 3. This did not meet my expectations at all. The relationship building was okay, but nothing spectacular for me. There was also a lot of similarities between Kellen and Howl's Moving Castle, and I don't really know why, but throughout the entire of this book I couldn't get Howl's Moving Castle out of my head. Howl travels to different towns or cities depending on what colour the wheel lands on within his house. Kellen travels to different Londons depending on what colour it is, and they have grey London, black London, red London and white London. So I just genuinely, I couldn't get Howl out of my head. It sort of ruined it for me a little bit, I think. But this is a book that I am due to reread this year, because Claire managed to purchase the entire trilogy for herself, and she also finished my collection off. So I think maybe rereading this is going to be a good thing for me, because I will read it outside of the hype, and I will also make sure that I don't watch Howl's Moving Castle within the time period of going to read this, so I can have a clear fresh head for when I come back to it. So my next one I'm really excited about, because this is a trilogy that you probably have already picked up on, and I love this trilogy so much. So I read the Perfect Trilogy by Helena Duggan, and that is A Place Called Perfect, The Trouble with Perfect, and The Battle for Perfect. Now, I had read A Place Called Perfect and I have rated that a 5-star. I still believe that the 5-star is fully earned by this, because it was edgy, it was a little bit gritty, there was children who had been wronged by adults, there had been adults who were just genuinely not listening to the children and not believing that things were being done when the children knew that they were. There is a lot of adults are stupid, children are pretty clever, and just everything about it was amazing, and I enjoyed becoming fully immersed into the world. I was completely invested in the characters and wanted to know everything I possibly could, and I just wanted to keep reading the trilogy. So we follow Violet in a town called Perfect, and when her and her family moved there, it is originally for her father's job. Now, the longer they spend there and the more they drink this special tea, she realises that her eyesight is starting to go a little bit off, and people in Perfect, everybody is wearing glasses. So it just sort of seems very strange to her, and she doesn't pick up on it until she starts to realise that her parents are actually acting strange. Her father is no longer in the house as often as he normally is. He's not coming home for tea. He's coming home really late at night, and he's barely interacting with his family, which is unusual for him. Her mother has all of a sudden become really obsessed with becoming a perfect housewife and a perfect social neighbour. And again, not quite how her mother is normally. She even takes up baking, I think it is, which throws Violet completely. Now, she then meets Boy, who has been part of Perfect, but a hidden part of Perfect, and that's where it gets interesting. So I'm going to leave it there, because as soon as this part of Perfect is unveiled, that's when things start to kick off, and that's when everything is put in the hands of the young children. I very quickly picked up a trouble with Perfect. Now, I rated this 4 stars because I struggled a little bit with this one with the bullying side of things. I definitely feel like the bully in this, there was no remorse shown, there was no consequence shown for the bully, which I realise that in real life a lot of the time there isn't, but it was almost just brushed under the carpet. It was a case of even the people who had been bullied by him, when something bad had happened to him or when he was just being a complete and utter arse, everybody was just like, oh yeah, okay, it's fine, this is how he normally is. Not cool. So I think that was my main reason for giving that a 4 stars. However, I immediately, as soon as I finished the book, I immediately gave A Battle for Perfect 5 stars. There was a bit of sci-fi with the monsters and the robots. There was just everything thrown into this, and there were relationships built up, which normally I don't like having new relationships being flung into a trilogy so later down the line, but this worked really well. It was just perfect, which I keep trying not to say whenever I talk about this trilogy because it sounds really cliche, but it worked so well. And yeah, I even, for whatever reason, I read the author's note at the end and it broke me, because Helena Duggan actually says goodbye to the characters, and I think that was when I finally realised this is the final book and we are never going to hear about these characters ever again. So it definitely is a trilogy of books that I will not be getting rid of. I stick to my ratings, I think, for these ones because, yeah, I think they were right. The next author I am moving on to is Holly Black. Now, I read Doll Bones, and this was a little middle grade that was sent to me by Claire because she said that it was nice and short, and I just wanted something short but sweet to an extent to read. This was not sweet. It was short, but it was not sweet. This was dark and grim and gritty, and it was everything I could have wanted. It's a doll who has been made with the ashes of a dead child, which I probably shouldn't have enjoyed as much as I did, but the twist within this book is just incredible. I don't even know what else to say about it. I definitely enjoy the darker side of things when it comes to children's books. But yeah, even the back just says, "My name is Eleanor Kirchner. You can call me the Queen. I died in 1985. Now it's time to play." This sounds like a horrendous horror story already. I don't think this is supposed to be a middle grade. I really don't. However, I definitely want more. I wanted more from this book. It got a 5 stars. I think it got a 5 stars. Either that or it got a 4 stars, and I want to put it to a 5 star. I am just... Doll Bones got a 4 stars. I am going to up this to a 5 star. I think my only qualm with it originally for the 4 stars was the fact that I wanted to know more about Eleanor Kirchner. I wanted to know everything leading up to it, because there were little snippets of things that had happened in her life and things leading up to her death, and it seemed very dark. That being said, I read The Cruel Prince. I did enjoy this book, but it took so long to get into. I wasn't a fan of all the tormenting violence at the beginning, which is how it felt. It felt very much like Prey and Predator, so I wasn't a fan of that at all. I also think that there are quite a few triggers within the book which there are no sort of warnings at the beginning. There are no notes of sensitive topics. It was very difficult to read, and yeah, it was quite a slow burner to start with. Once I got into it, I loved it, and I thought that it was such a good storyline, but it shouldn't have taken me like nearly 200 pages to get that into. I did give this 4 stars, however I have to take it down to 3 because I think it's very difficult to base just the book on its own and not take into account the rest of the trilogy, which I didn't enjoy. However, I do feel to an extent that this could have been a book on its own. If it had been ended off in a slightly different way, it could have been a book on its own. But, you know, I know a lot of people have enjoyed this trilogy. I know a lot of people have enjoyed this book in particular. This probably was my favourite book out of the trilogy. But thinking about it now, not worth the 4 stars. So next we go to my favourite read of 2019, and that was Scythe by Neil Shusterman. I have never read any sort of dystopian before. I've never read anything along the lines of this. I know that it says at the top that it's a true successor to the Hunger Games, which I did question once I got this book because I really don't like the Hunger Games. It was definitely something that called to me. I remember watching a book diary vlog. I think it was G at Book Roast. She did a vlog that just literally concentrated on her reading Scythe, and just the premise of it really gripped me because it wasn't something that I would ever pick up if I'd have just seen the front of the book. Now I did give this one a 5 stars. I think I stick to the 5 stars because it was such a good book. I enjoyed the characters. I felt for everybody. I was truly invested in what was going to happen. I loved Citra, I loved Rowan, and following them on their journey to become a scythe, even though they didn't choose to be a scythe, was just incredible. However, I do have one qualm with it, and that was that the usual trope of they shouldn't fall in love with each other, but they do, appeared very quickly, and it sort of felt like the relationship had taken its like lead very, very quickly. They were told that they were not to fall in love with each other, they were not to have a relationship, it was not allowed, because whoever didn't win would end up being killed. Now, to me, immediately I knew what was going to happen, and it sort of gave me a bit of a moment of rolling my eyes at the book, because it almost felt like that as soon as that had been said, they had feelings for each other, or they started flirting, and it was flirting that hadn't happened prior to this conversation. It was feelings that had appeared out of thin air that weren't there prior to this conversation. And I don't know where that came from. So then I moved on to Thunderhead because, again, thoroughly invested in all of the characters and everything that was happening. And they started doing fun little things like the colours of the sides on the front of the book were mentioned within the book before, so it gives you an idea of who it might be on the front of the cover. But I rated this a 4 stars because it just didn't feel as good as Scythe. I'm not 100% sure why, but halfway through I started to get really bored, and to the point where I ended up getting the audio book off Audible because I needed to just be able to just stick my headphones in and listen to it rather than sitting there and trying to focus my eyes on everything. That being said, as things went along, it ended on such a cliffhanger that I cried. So I do feel a little bit like it's still worth the 4 stars, but I won't be upping it to 5 because it just didn't reach the level of Scythe. And you will not be seeing the toll in this section because the less said about that book, the better. Now my next book is a book that I had never heard of until I started watching BookTube, and as soon as I watched BookTube and I started reaching out to different channels, this is the one book which just seemed to appear everywhere all of a sudden, and that is Sarah J Maas, A Court of Thorns and Roses. I devoured this book and I loved every single thing about it. I, for some reason, gave it a 4 stars, but I can tell you right now I would up it to 5 stars because I love this book so much. It's a quirky retelling of Beauty and the Beast. I'm gonna go with quirky because it is not really, I wouldn't really pick it up as a Beauty and the Beast retelling, but that was how people were putting it across. To an extent, I suppose so. Tamlin comes across as a very angry man, a big burly angry man who could be considered a beast at times, and Feyre is the beauty who shouldn't have been there but ended up being taken because she did wrong by the Fae. I love it so much. I did devour this within the space of less than a week. It was a nice quick read. I hadn't read any of Sarah J Maas's books before, and I found that I really enjoyed her style of writing with this. I didn't want to put this down at any point, which then made me move on to A Court of Mist and Fury. However, A Court of Mist and Fury took me a hell of a long time to read. I ended up picking it up in November and then not finishing it until I think it was January or February the year after. It was a lot, guys, it was a lot. I had stupidly fallen in love with Tamlin in Court of Thorns and Roses, and then we met Rhysand, and Sarah J Maas has destroyed my heart forever. Again, you won't be seeing the next book in this because I have read it this year, but in case I didn't mention, A Court of Mist and Fury was a 4 stars, and I think I stick with that because it wasn't as good as Court of Thorns and Roses, but it wasn't a terrible book either, and I did thoroughly enjoy it when I actually picked it up. Next up is the Stalking Jack the Ripper series. Now, I have only read 2 in the series, but I do have the other 2 up on my shelf, which I do plan on getting to this year. But the Stalking Jack the Ripper actually got a 4 stars for me. I didn't really enjoy this as much as I think everybody else did. I had this recommended to me by Kirsty, and she said that it was such a fantastic read and she thought I'd like it. I hadn't really read anything that was a crime thriller but sort of fantasy at the same time. It was sort of, yeah, there was a bit of romance. It was just a bit of everything, and originally I did think that it was just crime and thriller. But the fact that I found out that there was a hell of a lot more to it, it was a lot chunkier, there was a lot more detail to it, there was a lot more chunk to the actual story. It was mind-blowing how they did it. I am still thoroughly impressed with the pictures that are presented in the book, and then things like the blood splatter on each page. I thoroughly enjoyed that. There's slight bits of history added to it. It was just, overall it was really good. I also enjoyed the bit of grim reality of post-mortems appearing. There was a lot of detail within that and I thoroughly enjoyed it. I enjoyed getting to know Audrey Rose. I hated getting to know Thomas Creswell and wanted to punch him in the face. Kirsty had several messages off me where I was just very, very shouty because I was getting irritated with him. However, I then moved on to Hunting Prince Dracula, and I said all along that I thought that I was going to really, really enjoy this book because vampires. However, this did still get a 4 stars from me because it just didn't seem to hit the spot. But good news is I did soften to Thomas Creswell. I really enjoyed getting to know his softer side in this book, and also the fun kick-ass side of Audrey Rose, just trying to break down barriers constantly, was incredible. I did enjoy the whole vampire scenario thing, but I just couldn't, I don't know, I just couldn't get there with the 5 stars. So that was part 1 of my 2019 high ratings and whether they stay at that. So if you have enjoyed this video, then don't forget to click the like below and subscribe if you haven't already. I hope you will be sticking around for part 2, and I will see you in this week's vlog. Bye!